It is 2 o'clock. We're going to start the meeting. So first things first, we're going to go to apologies. Helen, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I have had apologies for this afternoon's meeting from the Chairman, Councillor Luca, and he has asked me to forward an email which I forwarded to you explaining why he's not able to attend today. Also apologies from Helen Williams and also Martin Rogerson.
Thank you. So we'll go on to the next part. Any declarations of interest today? No? Okay. So then the next is the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January 2026. Have we got an amendments to them? Reverend Metcalfe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Following the last meeting, I'd like to make two additions to the report on SACRAs and RE, if I may. I'll read them out. They're very simple and straightforward. One's an addition, one's a correction. It is not the case that elective education at home children have to follow the locally agreed syllabus in RE, nor any other syllabus as such. In this respect, they are currently in the same position as free schools. The white paper is tightening up regulations around EHE children, but this does not include RE as far as I understand it at the moment. That's the correction. I omitted to say that the Staffordshire agreed syllabus in RE allows and even encourages schools to fulfil their legal obligations for RE at Key Stage 4 by following a suitable GCSE RE course for all Key Stage 4 pupils. Many schools do this, but it is entirely up to each school whether it then enters the pupils for the actual exam, and some schools do not. The exam results, therefore, give only a partial picture of what is going on. Thank you.
May I collect that paper from you, Reverend, and then we can add that? Thank you. And then with those amendments, is everyone okay with approving the meeting from approving the minutes from the previous meeting? Thank you. Okay, so now we will go on to our first full agenda item, that is safeguarding concerns on self-neglect. So I will hand this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And in the absence of Councillor Rogerson, I've just been asked to introduce the item. So bear with me, it's a little bit of a last-minute look through it all. So hopefully you've all had opportunity to read the full report. I will start, as has just been pointed out to me as well, that some of the links on there, due to our change as our corporate changes to our intranet or our internet, some of those links haven't been working. So I will send those out following today's meeting, and my apologies for not having picked up on that. I did the report before the change, so I apologise for that. So the report that we're bringing today is in connection with our response as a local authority to concerns relating to self-neglect. And we'd like your consideration of how we are currently addressing this issue and the steps that we're taking to improve our response, as we're always looking for continuous improvement in connection with self-neglect when it comes to safeguarding adults in Staffordshire. I'm joined today by a colleague of mine, Carmel Warren, who is from Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service, and she will also provide some information in connection with their engagement, both with the board and what they do as a service to support people who may be experiencing or at risk of self-neglect. So to be very clear that when we're talking here about self-neglect, we're referring to adults who fall under Section 42 of the Care Act. So that's adults who have reason or who have needs for care and support, who may be at risk of or experiencing abuse, and in this case self-neglect, and due to their care and support needs are unable to protect themselves. I say that because there are a number of people out there who may be exhibiting behaviour that might be associated with self-neglect, but they may not all fall into our area or into the work that we do. I've given a description in the report of what self-neglect can consist of, and this can be to do with a lack of meeting somebody's personal hygiene or meeting self-care. refusing to engage with health services or social care services, and it could also include things such as hoarding type behaviour or unable to maintain their property to a standard, placing either themselves or at times as well other people at risk. So self-neglect is I would say, growing area that makes it sound it's an interesting term, isn't it? But we're becoming more aware of concerns related to self-neglect. Some of this is society's awareness, which is a benefit, and certainly we as a local authority have been working alongside our colleagues through the Adult Safeguarding Board to improve the awareness across the county of self-neglect. This is for reasons of sort of a national awareness that concerns related to self-neglect are more likely to end up requiring a safeguarding adult review. That's obviously the most sort of serious review that we do into concerns related to adult safeguarding. Across the country, there's a growing trend towards self-neglect, and we need to take proactive action to ensure that we are supporting the people in Staffordshire as best as we can. There are some factors that can indicate self-neglect, and some of those will consist of things such as alcohol or use of drugs, illegal substances. There's also a link between people who have diabetes and self-neglect, and also mental health needs. This is what's been produced nationally, not locally, so this is a review of national data to highlight these areas as being a consistent factor within self-neglect. What this national data does also identify is quite a complex interplay of a number of different factors. Just because somebody may exhibit, or have one of those factors doesn't automatically mean that they're going to self-neglect. However, what it does identify is where there's a combination of these, particularly where it's linked to other mental health needs, or in particular where somebody is grieving or has suffered a traumatic past, that those risks increase. Now, this is important because this may help us to identify and respond more effectively earlier on to concerns of self-neglect before it becomes more apparent or before people are at higher risk of death as well. So our local position, as I've said, is that referral rates of self-neglect have been steadily increasing over the past 12 months. This is raising from it being the 6th most common type of abuse in January 2025 to the 5th most common type of abuse in December 2025. Now, whilst this might not seem like, a lot, actually, this is quite a substantial change for us. And if I go back even further, because I've been around for some years, it used to be one of the lowest forms of abuse or neglect that we identified. And you have got some charts there just to identify that as well for your information. With regards to our local safeguarding adult reviews, you will see that the majority actually of our safeguarding adult reviews have consisted of some element of self-neglect. And again, this is something that we are monitoring and reviewing as a system. And our self-neglect local SARs include David, Andrew and Gillian, and this has emphasised several key themes. So this is the importance of understanding the person's history and the meaning of their self-neglect. This is about good social work practice. Understanding people's history helps us to be able to support them in the future and to make changes. We need to ensure that we've got a good consideration of all legal options and that we're clear from the outset what they could be. That's not to say that we need to instigate legal options, but we just must be aware of these so that we take action at the right time should we need to. Most importantly, though, is the need for a multi-agency approach, and this is something that we endeavour to do throughout all inquiries, but is most important when we're working where self-neglect may be prevalent. This is in the main because people are not necessarily engaging with all services, and sometimes services may step away as a result of that. So through our safeguarding board and through those arrangements that we have, we can ensure that partner agencies stay involved to support with information sharing and risk assessment throughout that time. There are a number of others there, but I won't go through them all now. The other work that we've been doing as a board is to improve the safeguarding information connected with self-neglect for our practitioners across the system. And all agencies have been involved in producing a workbook and associated documents to support practitioners, giving them tools that they can use and utilise to support both conversations and interventions with people where self-neglect is a risk. We are also working on a risk assessment, which is still waiting to come out. This is so we can have a joint approach to the risks associated with self-neglect. So, in conclusion, whilst we have started to make steps in regards to improving our response to self-neglect, we are continuing with a series of audits that we complete internally and also through the board to review concerns where self-neglect was evident, to ensure that practice is as expected, and then take actions where needed. We also have a comprehensive training programme, which is a rolling programme, which is done through the SWLA and includes things such as trauma-informed practice, hoarding awareness, and responding to self-neglect. What I would say is none of this is a once and done process. Training is something that needs to be repeated over time, and we need to revisit and refresh that training as well to make sure that it's up to date as we move forward. But hopefully that's given you an overview of where we're at the moment, and I now invite questions. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, before we go to questions, Carmel, would you like to add anything to that as well, on what the fire department does, so that we can ask questions on that too, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. So the fire service will come across self-neglect cases either through a home fire safety visit or an operational incident. Most of our self-neglect safeguarding referrals that we make are going to be around hoarding, and as Ruth alluded to, certainly the fire service has seen an escalation in that. For our last quarter, of the 32 safeguarding referrals we've made, 28 of them were for self-neglect. I have to say that's split between Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, so they're not all for Staffordshire. So Ruth alluded to a working group that is chaired by the County Council. I was part of that, and we built up some toolkits to help practitioners when they go out there and do a home fire safety visit, or they've got onward referrals to make. The fire service have guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council around tools that we should be using, and only today I've got an invitation to a clutter and hoarding group where we're beginning to be looking at sharing approaches to the hoarding risk, sharing good practice, learn from case studies, which we think is really important. And again, as Ruth said, with the SARS that have taken place, we sit down and we look at the learning outcomes from that to see if we can address the issues and hopefully avoid those happening again. We'll receive updates and training from experts, and then we're going to build a network of practitioners within the fire and rescue service across the whole of the country that will come together and look at this issue. So you may think, well, why is the fire service involved with hoarding? Well, hoarding presents a huge fire risk for the fire service, not only for the residents of the property, but if they're adjoined as well, it'll have implications for the neighbours. So we may do some covert work with the neighbours, leaflet dropping to say, would you like us to come and do a home fire safety visit? And some of the hoarding can be really, really uncomfortable with infestation, vermin, faeces. So there's a level of equipment that we provide to our staff. But when we come across these cases, we do make a referral for a social worker to go out and assess the situation. We will work with partners and do joint visits, as Ruth alluded to, most commonly either with the housing provider or environmental health, because if it's a rented property, they could be in breach of their tenancy. So what happens then if there's a prohibition order? Where does that person go? Because we don't want to escalate the problem. We need to support. Years ago, we might have helped cleaning the hoarding property out. We can't do that. Those days are gone, I'm afraid. So protection-wise, there are a number of things that we can do. We will fit additional alarms free of charge, including heat alarms. We will fit linked alarms free of charge. So if I can explain linked alarms to you, if you've got a utility room and then you've got an alarm in your kitchen and then you've got an alarm at the bottom of the stairs and then upstairs, if there's a fire in the utility room, it will talk to the other alarm. So if somebody's sleeping, that will wake them. So we can fit linked alarms as well. When we have a fatality from an accidental dwelling fire where there has been hoarding, we hold our own internal fatal fire review, and that might go to a stage 2, and we invite colleagues along to see what can happen. What we are finding, which is unfortunate, if some people have got telecare, the pendant system, sometimes they're having that and it's not linked to assisted technology to smoke alarms. So our ask is, it's always going to be, if telecare is fitted, and I know this is budgetary constraints, we would always say and recommend link them to the smoke alarm, and that negates the need for their occupier to press the pendant. They will go off independently. We will update fire control because we've got to think about the safety of firefighters. So the MDTs, their mobilising system will tell them if it's a hoarded property, and often, as Ruth will know, for severe hoarders, they may be left with just one room where they're residing. So we need to tell the firefighters, you'll find the resident in the downstairs front living room or the back bedroom, so they can go in and get them at the earliest opportunity. In the past, we were able to provide portable misting systems for those that were non-mobile. Unfortunately, there are financial constraints, we're unable to do that. But we will do, we do our own risk assessment, and we will send that to housing providers, family members, to say we recommend a portable system, misting systems in place. That could be a retrofit, or it could be a standalone one if the person's non-mobile. Other issues around hoarding, again, Ruth alluded to alcohol and drug misuse, also smoking. So that's a big issue for us. Often if people are cooking, it's not the cooking that's the problem, it's if they fall asleep and leave the food unattended. Similarly, with people that smoke, if they've got drug or medication makes them drowsy, those are what's causing fires. So we also work with Tobacco Alliance and other smoking cessation groups to help in that regard. So there is a lot that goes on within the fire service, but we couldn't do any of it without working with our colleagues from safeguarding teams. It will give us advice and support. So open to any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty, please.
Thank you. I just want to go to page 13 of the report, and I'm looking at like the neglect omission line, which are all particularly high, but Stafford being the highest. And I just wondered what measures are in place to help people make that decision, because I know I can understand how hard it must be for somebody that cares for a person to make that decision to report these things. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about what we do within Stafford to maybe try and lower that number.
Okay, so... Sorry, forgot to put my microphone on, rookie error. So what I would say is, what I have done since, which I am going to send out, is I've looked at this, the nature of abuse and neglect at the top, so neglect and omission, and then the types haven't been done by per 100,000. So when we change it into per 100,000, you see the rate in Staffordshire does come down.
Yeah.
It's actually to do with the obviously with the population density, so numbers can look really high, and it can look like Stafford at times is particularly high. Actually, what you will find is, certainly from self-neglect, I've done it specifically for self-neglect, actually Cannock is quite a high area for self-neglect, more so actually per 100,000 than Stafford is. So we have to look at it from that perspective, and that's the work we're starting to do, is to look to see whether there's particular areas we can target going forward, which this work now is enabling us to do as we map it out. And so we're doing the types of abuse per district, where we've got that sort of heat map, we're now producing specifically with the 100,000, so that we can now be looking more in depth at those areas that we may want to target. Now, we are developing some of that work plan, and it also links in with the wider work that we need to do about hearing from some of our harder to hear groups as well, which again is work that we've just started we've started to move forward on through some commissioning arrangements as well, to look at how we can better target those areas. But I will send, I've got them here. They're beautiful charts. I'm sorry, Stafford's cut off the end, which isn't helpful, is it? But it is on the one that I only just realised that. I went, where's Stafford gone? I live in Stafford. I've cut off my own town. But I will get those sent out. I'll send them over to you, Helen, for dissemination afterwards.
Any follow-up questions? Thank you. Councillor Mullins, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you for the report, and thank you for stepping in last minute and so forth. I've just got the two questions on this one. Referrals to self-neglect arising locally and nationally. Can you clarify whether this reflects increased incidents, improves identification, or greater reporting confidence?
I would certainly say that there is greater awareness, so we do know that nationally and locally as well. The awareness of self-neglect, and also hopefully greater understanding of how to refer in as well. So our closer working with the partners, and also what I would say is the national recognition through SARS of the importance of self-neglect has increased general awareness. And as I've said, and I think Carmel alluded to, our real close working relationships that we've developed locally as well with all partner agencies, because of the SARS, the Safeguarding Adult Reviews that we've had, has helped us to be better at identifying self-neglect. What I would add to that as well is that we're seeing self-neglect reported earlier. So hopefully what we'll start to see is a reduction, this is going to take us some time, in those that are then going to the more significant levels. Now, the numbers might stay the same as it were numerically, but percentage-wise, hopefully we're hoping that we'll start to see that reduce over time, but that will take a couple of years.
Thank you for that. And the only second question I got is, looking on page 13, the abuse per district area. I'm now going to nitpick at this, but at the bottom it says out of county, one case. Would it be possible to give us detail on where this particular case is? I know it's a shot in the dark, but you know.
I love a shot in the dark sometimes. I can't tell you where it was, and actually what I would say is if it's out of county, it doesn't actually fall into our jurisdiction. We're only responsible for safeguarding in our area. What I would hope, and I can go back and check, is to make sure it was referred on to the right county to deal with. Sometimes we may be made aware of it because we're responsible still for completing the adult social care assessment. So that would be my assumption as to why it has been shared with us. But I could clarify that for you and come back to you with that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions? Yes.
I've got a question. So when the fire service would go out and they go to, let's say, a hoarding place and they put a referral in for self-neglect, how long does it take the council to respond to that referral, and how quick do they act on getting someone out to go out and assess?
So that will depend on the risk level. So if it's a high risk, then we do respond on the same day. So if we need to go out and there's immediate risk, particularly if it's been identified that the property is unsafe and the person can't remain in the property. Now, obviously, that's not a decision we can make, and it's not a decision you can make, is it? But actually, if that's been determined by the relevant council authorities, then that would then mean we would respond on the same day. So everything is done on, like I say, on that risk basis, but all concerns anyway are reviewed on the same day. So even if it wasn't initially apparent that it was high risk, that would be when we'd make that decision. So then that can be anything between on that day or certainly within 2 weeks. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions at all, Councillor Edwards? Councillor Edwards.
It's not such a, thank you very much for your report. It's really interesting, but it's more of a comment actually than a question. And that's to, I'd personally like to say a big thank you to the fire service. And I've been up to the fire service a few times with different things and what have you, and problems. And I really appreciate the work that the fire service does in this situation. I think you do a fantastic job. I want to personally say thank you very much, and I think probably the committee would agree with me, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Orlandi Fantini, please.
Hi, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. I also was going to thank the fire service as well and yourself for the great work you're doing. Also, what I would like to ask as a county councillor, and being a direct link to constituents, and I'm visiting a constituent tomorrow, what is it that we can do to help or refer forward if there is anything that we identify as we do go and visit people in their homes, then if there is anything that we see that may obviously be a risk as such, what is it that we can do to help?
Certainly to let us know, and I appreciate actually the question and the thought around it. You are a real great link into your communities, and the earlier that we spot these situations, the better. Absolutely. So what I would say is by all means you can share it with myself, but we have got our referral email address if that's easier, into our VA Staffordshire or telephone call in. If you've got immediate concerns, I would say to do that. You can contact me if you're not sure and want a conversation absolutely about a situation. But if you've got immediate concerns for somebody, contacting our Staffordshire Cares VA helpline would be what I'd suggest people do as soon as possible. But like I say, by all means get in touch with myself if it's something that you're not sure about, and I can obviously advise in that instance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I actually have a question, if that's all right. So as we know, technology is coming around a lot more now. We can use it in far more ways than we ever could before. Today I was talking to the infrastructure team, and they're looking at a program where they're using Amazon tablets to then in different places to help loneliness. How are you using are you thinking about using technology to check in with people to make sure they're okay? Because loneliness can lead to self-neglect and less awareness. So how are you using technology, or are you?
I completely agree with regards to loneliness. Loneliness, feelings of isolation are a risk of all types of abuse and neglect as well. And particularly with self-neglect, that feeling of hopelessness can be really sort of pervasive and can be really impactful. So we are looking at how we better use technology. We have a series of assistive technology and AI now champions within adult social care. We are looking for ways that we can provide, as you said, check-in services with people where people consent, obviously, which is often the issue with self-neglect, which we've just got to work with. But we are trying to find those ways that would appear to be less invasive for people, so a way to start to be able to do that. As well, understanding how we can use technology to its best advantage, I think, is really important. And what I would say, just certainly with regards to AI use, is there's lots of talk, and I'm sure you've all seen it in the media, with, well, you might have done, with regards to how we use it within adult social care. You may have heard of things such as magic notes to help us be able to complete assessments in a more timely way, etc. And there are obviously ethical considerations for us to look at there, and that we're constantly reviewing. But we are active engagers within that sphere. So we're going to 3 different sort of workshops and events nationally with regards to how we better use assistive technology and also artificial intelligence type things within adult social care. It's work in progress, as I'm sure it is for everyone. And what I would say is just this week, it's my grandma's 94th birthday, and she has lost her sight. And so she is using AI glasses to be able to read her books. So that sort of thing that we use to try and, because for her is a sense of loneliness now, she can't leave her house as much. Those elements are really important, and seeing it firsthand always helps to make you see how this can be incredibly useful, even for somebody that has never really even used a mobile phone, and she finds it amazing. And she's got Dame Judi Dench's voice in her ear. She loves it.
It's fantastic, and happy birthday to your grandma. So, as you said there, you're using AI. Are you using AI as well to track hotspots to see where the area of great need to put resources in are doing that? Is that what's going forward as well?
Okay, so you're asking me some techie questions to do with IT. I'm a social worker. Okay. So the way I understand how it works is, yes, so we use that to help us understand the data. That's obviously dealt with by our data and performance teams. I don't want to claim any responsibility or knowledge for those things. But absolutely, some of these hotspots that we're doing, those sorts of areas are all being supported by the use of AI. The other thing we're doing is looking for better ways that we can get feedback from people who use our service as well. This is something that certainly within safeguarding has been increasingly difficult. So looking for ways using technology and also using AI to help us understand when we get certain bits of feedback. I don't understand, again, I'm using other people's words. We use that information to be able to interpret it. So we're not just hearing the feedback, we're using it to interpret where we might have certain issues as well. And all of that is helping us to give greater depth to our understanding as to our services and identify where maybe they're failing, not in that, but where we could improve and where we can make those improvements. And certainly when it comes to co-production, particularly within safeguarding, that's an area that we're working on alongside our commissioned advocacy service.
Thank you. Any more questions from anyone at all? No. Oh, yes, Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you. I'm just picking up on the limited cultural awareness that's listed. So does this data actually break down into cultural areas as well? And that's why you're saying it's a barrier because there's not that cultural awareness in the team that's investigating, etc.?
You're absolutely spot on. This is some of the work that we need to do. And as I've said, some of our harder to hear groups. So obviously we're aware of how our communities are made up, of the different cultural groups within that. For one thing, we have underrepresented groups, so we don't have as many referrals as we'd expect from those groups, just based on sort of percentage of population in those areas. And as well, we have a limited mix within our social work groups who are reflective of our community groups. This is something that we are aware of, and you might be aware that we're involved in the work of the of RES as well, which is our race equality work that we're doing within to look at how our employees, marry up with our community bases to look to see how we can redress some of that. I'm sure you can all appreciate when we're talking about such personal things such as safeguarding and particularly self-neglect, our cultural awareness for people is so important to help us engage. And yes, we do training and we can support, you know, and look to see. But sometimes there's nothing like a bit of shared experience and shared understanding to support somebody. And we're aware of that. It's something we're aware of widely within social work. And it's a really important foundation to what we do. So yes, short answer. I gave you quite a long answer. But yeah, I talk a lot, sorry.
Thank you. I've thought of another question. I'm so sorry. All it is you said that you're doing preemptive work to try and stop people from getting to the higher level. I just want to know what type of work that is and how you're helping people at the base level before it gets to an extreme.
So a lot of this is to do with our assessment of being able to engage with people, support people. So as you yourself identified, actually, when we can see that somebody's lonely, grieving, it's looking for community groups. It's how we link them into our community groups. So as you know, we've got our community help points and we've also got supportive communities as well. So giving people good, clear information, advice and guidance, and also supporting them to assess. But importantly, and just picking up on the fact that I've got colleagues here from the fire service, using our other agencies. So not everybody's going to need our service, but people come into contact with other services. So the more we work together, as Carmel has said, the better we inform partner agencies as well, so they can identify people. So going to the GP, you're talking about being lonely. Are they checking up in the GP surgery as to whether somebody is still taking care of themselves? Are they then calling them in for health checks, those sorts of things, so that we've got a way of being able to monitor people. It isn't just us as the local authority, it's all of the partner agencies working together, and that's what's going to support people earlier and better. So that's what we're doing.
It's fantastic. So we'll be able to see that perhaps in another year's time, that these partner agencies coming together, and we can see that perhaps the numbers might not go down, but they might not continue on the trend that they're looking at. Is that what we're looking at?
That would certainly be our hope. And as I say, we don't look at it as numbers, we'll be looking at it as percentages, and obviously based on referral. And also, as I say, risk level as well. What would be really good, I think, for us as a whole system, including our colleagues in Stoke-on-Trent, would be to see a decrease in the number of safeguarding adult referrals we get within this particular area. So we may still have concerns of self-neglect, but if we can show that we're working well together as a system, that is actually a very good outcome. So if I can sit here in a year's time and say that actually the level of self-neglect SARS that we've had come through has gone down, then I feel we're on the right road.
That's great. I look forward to seeing that. Has anyone got any more questions at all? No? So thank you for coming today, and I would like to send my thanks again to the fire service. Thank you. Hello?
Could I just send personal thanks to Carmel. Carmel has been a huge part of our safeguarding board, I think ever since I've been there. And Carmel, I hope you don't mind me saying, lucky her, is retiring this year. And I just want to extend my thanks to her publicly for the work that she's done to safeguard adults within Staffordshire. She's been a really active member of our safeguarding board, and certainly within Staffordshire, she's made a huge difference to the information, advice and guidance and support that we've had and been able to give as well to the people in our communities. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Thank you. Just have a minute to shuffle around and then we'll get started on the next agenda item. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we're going to go on to our next agenda item, which is school absenteeism and exclusion. We are having technical problems right now, so the slides that we can all see today, but they will not be webcast live. Instead, they will be added after the meeting as an amendment onto the webcast. So I'd like to pass over to you, to the officers and to the Cabinet member. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start then. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to present two reports to you. The first one is the school's attendance and inclusion, the absentee and inclusions that you've read. When we refer to schools, we mean both maintained schools and academies. You will have seen a great deal of interest in schools' attendance. The Department for Education has identified school attendance as a key priority, and we will continue to promote the importance of going to school. There is a gap in performance of those children and young people identified as disadvantaged and their peers. If children are absent from school, this gap is only going to get wider. The report sets out the responsibilities that schools and the local authority each have in promoting regular attendance. Towards the end, you will see details of the campaigns we are running to encourage good attendance in Staffordshire. These are helpful, but some families' campaigns alone are not enough. There are times when both schools and the council have to take further action where attendance isn't good enough. Quite often, from a safeguarding aspect, you will hear a comment that school is a protective factor. This means that a school should be a safe place for children who are at risk of being harmed, exploited, or drawn into antisocial or criminal activities. For this to be the case, children need to be at school, they need to attend. We'll be sharing some attendance data today. Overall, Staffordshire performs better than national averages, but for some groups the trends are more concerning. Although things have improved since last year, we still have too many children without good attendance habits. As a Cabinet member, this is something I'm very concerned about, and I'm keen that we continue using early help to support children and their families to build better routines and develop those good attendance habits. The report also covers exclusions and sets out the different responsibilities between schools and the council. You'll see the data that after providing additional support to schools, the number of permanent exclusions this year is lower than it was last year. I expect you'll have a few questions about exclusions and how we are working with education colleagues to support these children who are, as I've said before, some of our most vulnerable. So I'll stop there for now and answer any questions with the aid of Tim.
Shall we run through the slides which provide some of that data in terms of the performances, if that's okay with everybody?
Yeah, we'll run through the slides first and then we'll do questions as a whole on the whole subject, if that's okay. Yeah.
So the first slide just provides the overview that we will then go through in detail in terms of attendance and then exclusions. So the first slide just provides that overview, particularly around attendance, and the comparisons by academic year. I think it's more important, though, that it's the slide on the right-hand side of that slide, particularly around those youngsters who are persistently absent or who are severely absent. So a youngster that's identified as being persistently absent is a child who's got attendance is less than 90%. So absence is greater than 10%. and then they are classed as persistently absent. And then in terms of the severe absent, it's where there is an absence of more than 50%. And as you can see there, the numbers are reducing year on year, particularly around that persistent absence and the severe absence. And one of the things that we're, again, working with schools, and we'll come on to talk about some of the campaigns that we have to develop some of the attendance habits. The next slide then just breaks that down into particular year groups. And again, that comparison on a year by year. And again, it's the same picture that we see as we go through kind of the school age. So youngsters start off school not too badly, but as you can see there, as youngsters move into the secondary sector, their attendance dips and significantly at Key Stage 4. One of the things I would say again, and it comes back to the point that Councillor Higgins made, is that whilst Staffordshire's attendance is better than the national averages for all of these measures, you can see why we are particularly concerned around that Key Stage 4 attendance. And then if you, the final slide in terms of some of that data then breaks that down and looking at particular groups of youngsters. And so that, you know, when you look at the average, which is the orange dotted line at the top, and then when you look at some of our vulnerable youngsters, so you look at the youngsters who are subject to a child protection plan, or those youngsters who are identified as child in need, have significantly lower attendance than youngsters who don't feature in those particular groups. And so one of the things that we continue to do is work with our kind of partners. And one of the things that, again, Councillor Higgins has made is about making sure that we've got that early help and support early to ensure that youngsters get into those good habits. So that's the performance. I think in terms of the next slide is, and I'm hoping if I click on it, if I click, right. Okay, the reason why this is really important is that for colleagues where we've shared this information before, we started with the Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 campaign around attendance. But this year, our focus is around that Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4. And we just wanted to play, just press play again, do I? And it'll work, yeah. To play the campaign that we're having for Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 secondary attendance.
Jade?
Yeah.
Tom? Yeah. Charlie? Amber?
Here.
Charlie?
Have you seen Charlie?
Where's Charlie, sir?
He hasn't been
Charlie?
if anyone else has seen him.
Walker, it's the 9th absent. Please call us back.
Charlie?
Yeah, sorry, I'm late, sir.
Charlie? Okay, calm it down, everyone, please. Thanks, Charlie. Please have a seat. Okay, everyone, open your books to page 24, please. Charlie, can I just have a quick look, please, mate? Have a seat, Charlie. You seem a bit... Is everything okay?
Yeah, everything's fine, sir.
What's going on, mate?
You wouldn't get it, you wouldn't understand.
Maybe not, but I can listen. I'm here. Jade?
Yeah.
Tom? Yeah. Charlie?
Here.
And so that's the secondary campaign that we're having to encourage and to support increased and better attendance in school. On the slide now, it's an update in terms of the primary campaign is called about Little Heroes. The hero bit is here every day and ready and on time. That's what the hero bit is around, and we've developed it again to round 2 for this year, as well as then we've got what we're calling the Helpful Bear, which is around actually talking about kind of anxieties. One of the things that particularly youngsters face is being anxious at going to school, and actually that anxiousness and some of that anxiety is a natural reaction to things that have changed, and so we're using the bear with our primary sector. And then just moving into exclusions, and I think Councillor Higgins made the point around the exclusions that we're seeing across Staffordshire. And I have to say, this is the autumn term exclusion data. So if you look at 24-25, during the autumn term, there was 110 permanent exclusions. In the 25-26 academic year, same period of time in the autumn term, that's reduced by nearly 50%, not quite 50%, but reduced to 65. Again, you can see the breakdown there by districts, and all districts are seeing an improvement, but the challenges still remain in parts of the county, particularly there in Cannock. And then on the right-hand side there, you can see, again, that significant challenge around, particularly around youngsters who are in Key Stage 4, which is years 10 and 11. So those youngsters are 15, 16-year-old youngsters. And then the final slide, again, that we're, again, really concerned about, particularly around some of our vulnerable youngsters, but really pleased that this year, currently, in terms of children who are in our care, haven't seen any permanent exclusions during the autumn term. And again, in terms of those youngsters who are subject to a child protection plan, again, you can see that didn't receive any permanent exclusions during the autumn term. I'll pause there.
Thank you, that's fantastic. Before we start, I want to just make something clear. Us as an authority, we have certain limitations, especially when it comes to academies. Can you explain where our reach can go to? But after a certain point, it is up to the academies whether they exclude pupils, what it is that they have the power to do, and what our power is.
So in terms of permanent exclusions, it's the same responsibility whether they're a maintained school or they are an academy. There is a process to follow, and that's set out, and the only person who can make a permanent exclusion is the head teacher. And then once that permanent exclusion has taken place, there is a process to go through in terms of reviewing those permanent exclusions, and that's through then a governor's decision panel. And then there's a process after that. There is an independent reviewing panel should it be challenged there. So in terms of the permanent exclusions, it's the same for maintained schools and academies.
The school decides how the school decides to keep children in, what they decide to do within their school to keep children in there, what environment they want to foster.
So again, that's not a difference in terms of its governance structure. There are requirements set out, and again, it's in terms of authorising absence or not, particularly is the decision of the head teacher in line with their attendance policy.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. We have heard this morning from some elected home education parents before this meeting. We've also visited we visited Burton Prue, and with all the good intentions in the world of that video that we just saw, I think it runs much deeper than that. And I did mention earlier that the whole school setting, and a lot of children have difficulty within the school setting because there's just too much pressure within that environment for them, and they can't cope with that level of intensity, basically. So a lot of people are coming out of school because of that reason. So my question is, if we aren't looking at different ways to teach our children and meet their needs within the school environment, then how you know, are we looking at different ways to teach our children? Because as an individual, every child learns differently. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You can't always get a child to sit in a classroom, you know, and that's my question.
I think it's very apt that you're asking that question this week, given that on Monday the Department for Education published their white paper. And kind of the part of that is the expectations around what does it mean to be an inclusive mainstream school, so that we'll continue to look at that. And I have to say that that what we need to balance is the responsibilities of the school and the requirements of the school versus the needs of the child. You're quite right, and one of the things that we're working on, particularly through a special educational needs perspective, is around supporting schools to meet some of the particular needs of those children within the education system.
Do you have any follow-up questions? Councillor Angela, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much for your report, and thank you, Janet, for your report as well. My question really relates back to our children in care. You know, we visited that PRU in Burton a few weeks ago, and I said to the person that was running the school, you know, how many children have you got that's in care in this school? And it didn't give me a specific number, but he said quite a few. And I really worry about what we can do, as we're all corporate parents in this, you know, the counsellors. What can we do to help our children in care not get into this position where they're in a PRU situation? You said, Tim, that there was no exclusions for children in care, which is a great news, but I worry about our children in care in PRU situations and what we can do more to help them. Thank you, because these are our children that come from really probably horrific backgrounds and probably got loads of, you know, baggage behind it all. But I'd like to know your answer to that. Thank you.
So again, in terms of the work that our virtual school are doing, a couple of programmes that they're supporting mainstream schools with. The first thing to say is that all of our schools have got what we call the designated teacher to kind of support looked after children. One of the things I just want to go back to the I'm Here campaign is about making sure that every youngster has a trusted individual at school that they can go and have a conversation with and to kind of share some of their concerns. So that again is something that we're promoting. But from a virtual school perspective, two things. We are developing and been developing a program that's called RRP, we would refer to it as, but it's relational and restorative practice. So again, it's about thinking about the needs of the youngster and what's their kind of background in terms of their trauma or their attachment, and thinking about how we use that to inform the way in which we respond to youngsters. And we've got a number of schools now who are undertaking what we call the RRP pathway, or the attachment pathway, and that's to support schools in understanding the youngsters and recognising that sometimes some of that behaviour is a response to something rather than necessarily being something different to that. And then the other aspect that we're working on is what's called raising attainment of disadvantaged youngsters. So we would say RADY, R-A-D-Y. And again, that's a focus around thinking about, you know, how do we support some of these youngsters to achieve their potential, and thinking about how we support them in the classroom. So those are a couple of processes that we take place to support particularly youngsters who are in care, but also youngsters, a broader section of youngsters with a social worker or who are involved with social care.
Just wanted to also add the education inclusion officers who work with students who've been permanently excluded, they work with that child wherever they are on the vulnerability scale, but also they do lots of early intervention work with schools. So we've recently set up something called COPE, which is a sort of like an advice line. I can't remember what COPE stands for now, it's got completely gone out of my head. Something permanent exclusion.
Consideration of permanent exclusions.
Consideration of permanent exclusion, thank you, Tim. And we're encouraging schools, and more schools are using this. They're contacting us when they've got concerns around students. We're then giving advice on how to keep those children on roll. That's part of the reason why we've seen so many fewer children being excluded, because we're giving that early advice when those schools have got those concerns, those low-level concerns, before they're raising to the point where they're being excluded.
Yeah, I'll just go back to Councillor Doherty's question about the, the video and about the teaching. Being an ex-teacher working in a very deprived school, way back many years ago, I realised that the curriculum was not fit for a lot of the young people that were trying to do English literature exam, and they couldn't even read. So when I came into this post, and this is a wider issue to this, but it links in. I lobbied MPs. We've sent a letter to MPs. We're encouraging MPs, and the government needs to change the curriculum. We are doing what we can do here locally, and we're working really hard to improve the prospects and the, for young people of Staffordshire. But we can't do everything, and we do need the government. And I was hoping to have more on Monday from them about looking at the curriculum, because the curriculum is great if you're academic and you can do that sort of thing, but if you're somebody who is struggling at school, to be put into a situation where you've got to do an exam and you can't even read, it's setting young people up to fail. So we are doing our best to get the government to change, to take the pressure off schools so that they haven't got to reach all these high stats all the time, so that they can actually spend time with looking and helping a young person on a one-to-one individual. But until the government changes the curriculum and takes that pressure off schools, unfortunately we're in the situation we're in, and we're doing the very best, and the officers are doing the very best they can with their hands tied, really, if that answers that for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you once again for the report as well. My question is on about the 6-day provision duty. Are we constantly meeting the target for the 6-day provision duty, or have we fallen just behind?
I don't know the actual numbers, so I can't give you the actual numbers, but we are generally meeting it. We are most there. Unfortunately, with the 6-day provision, that is dependent on when a school notifies us as well. So a school may have excluded that child 5 days ago and doesn't tell us till the 5th day. So then we're on the back foot straight away. So again, we're working with schools to make sure that they are telling us as soon as it happens, so we can support straight away. So if we are being informed early on, then we are doing that within that 6-day period.
Thank you. And just the other one, so to request the numbers, cheers, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Bell.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. We all know that between primary and secondary there's a drop-off in attendance that gets worse as secondary progresses. And I welcome the campaigns that you're running there, but I'm not sure they're particularly targeting the Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3 issue. And I just wonder how you are addressing that, Tim, as a key strategic priority.
Thanks. And so what our education welfare officers are doing is having those targeted support meetings with schools. And what's helpful now is the department are providing information in terms of attendance data so that secondary schools can start to see some of that kind of attendance of their new cohort as they're coming in, and part of those targeted support meetings are taking place are ensuring that schools are using that information to think about how they target their cohorts. The second bit of that is they also have what's called district meetings, and that opportunity to kind of share effective practice, because one of the things that we do know is there is really effective practice going on, and it's about how schools share that practice as well. So that's kind of two targeted approaches around that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as a follow-up to that, is there any evidence that that data is being used effectively? So, for example, if a child's attending at 95% in year, I know it's only just started, but in year 6, and then they go to year 7, year 8, and it suddenly becomes 90, 85. How is that being used? And is the categorisation process, which I know you use here, is attendance being included in that decision-making process?
Yes, sorry. Struggle with the button then. Yes, so we include attendance and exclusions. And for exclusions, we only look at persistent disruptive behaviour, but we do include attendance.
And just to pick up on that, so we call them those targeted support meetings, and depending on the overall attendance performance of a school, then we either offer an annual conversation, or where we've got lower attendance, then actually that takes place as a termly meeting. So again, we're not only are we expecting schools to target individuals, but we're also targeting the schools that we're having those kind of more frequent visits with.
And just in terms of that categorisation, so before we look at or issue the letters to the schools, when Carl was still in post, we looked at the attendance data and the exclusion data with Carl to make sure what we were saying from a school improvement side was similar messages to what the attendance guys and exclusion guys were saying as well.
Carry on. So in terms of that process then, are we confident moving forward that the categorisation process is having an impact on those schools? Is the data showing that in terms of attendance and exclusions? In other words, is it working?
In terms of the targeted support meetings, I think it's too early to tell, in the sense that we've only been doing this for just over 12 months, because if, again, working together to improve school attendance came in September 2024. But what we would say is certainly the conversations that we're having, particularly with the department around some of our maintained schools, is that we can start to see some of the improvement in some of that attendance, the overall attendance in those schools, but early days.
And also, just to add to that, as an archdiocese, I'd be keen to have discussions with you about the attendance in our schools. So if there are any issues, we can work in partnership.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll certainly make those arrangements so that we can have those discussions.
Thank you. Now, follow up about exclusions, if I may. Obviously, the education inclusion officers work with schools to see if there can be situations where exclusions can be rescinded. How many are rescinded, and what's the impact of that? The concern I've got with that question is, are children being hidden in the statistics? That's okay, thank you. And just while you are finding it, again, the concern from Councillor Doherty about the elective home education, sometimes there are examples where maybe a child is electively home educated to avoid exclusion.
I think in terms of that, I'll come on to the second point first. I think Charles has just got the data about the rescinds. I think in terms of there are a number of reasons why youngsters are being removed from a school role. And I think one of the things that Neil will talk about, and he can pick up particularly, is where we've got some of those concerns. Those youngsters are visited very quickly to understand the quality of the provision that is being provided, and where we've got concerns around the quality of that provision, then the necessary processes are taken in order to secure a school place.
In terms of rescinds, we've had 31 rescinded this year, which is a third of the numbers that we've had. And that could be because of procedural impropriety. It could be that it's been many reasons for that, but procedural impropriety is one of the big ones, unfortunately. So there are quite a few rescinds. But in terms of elective home education as well, your question there, so yes, there are unfortunately students who come out of school to avoid being permanently excluded. The EHE team will have conversations with parents, say actually you are being provided with an education. It may be a PRU, it may be a block contract, tutoring, which could be better, could meet that child's needs. So we do try to discourage that if they are doing that to avoid the exclusion.
And thank you. And the 31 rescinded exclusions, is there any follow-up of attendance, for example, of those children to ensure that they are actually attending the setting? They may be on a school roll, but are they attending? Because they tend to be the very vulnerable.
To be honest, off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm quite new to this role, so I don't know entirely. I do think there is some consideration. The EIOs wouldn't necessarily follow that up and check whether that child is in school, but there will be some mechanism to ensure that that is in place.
And I would welcome feedback on that in the future, if possible, please. Thank you.
We'll bring that back. One of the things that we track again is the non-attendance, and where we've got those youngsters who are either persistently absent or who are severely absent, then again we want to understand from the school what are they doing to support that attendance in school.
Thank you. I actually have a question. So I understand that attendance is important, but there are certain situations where a child could be chronically ill. Say if they're going through cancer treatment, where they absolutely cannot be in school, but then they can come back, so their attendance may be low due to an illness that is ongoing. How are we ensuring that the schools aren't then going to the parents, okay, you need to come in for to have a conversation about attendance? How are we making sure that the parents, when they're going through a stressful time with a sick child, that the school isn't then berating them because of the child's attendance there?
Again, that's for the school to decide, and there are particular registration marks, and so where a youngster is ill and too ill to attend school, then we would expect that the school's having those discussions with the parents.
Thank you. Councillor Doughty.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether this would be a question for a later date, but I'm just wondering, the teachers themselves, how much pressure they're under already, and with the white paper coming and talking about inclusion, for SEND children, they have 8 lessons a day, and when that day ends, they don't finish because they have to go home, and then they're doing work at home, setting up the lessons for the next day, and so on and so on. So when those SEND children come in, that will be extra work for them to do. So how, when will they have that time to be available to spend with children on a one-to-one, if a child comes to them, they're going to be so busy that they just don't have time to sit and have a conversation with a child. I just wonder how that's going to work.
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of work out in my mind what the question is here. So you're talking about the kind of the...
How available can the teachers be is the question.
And again, part of that is around that kind of inclusion aspect to this. And if we look at the white paper, there is that talking about some of that and it's called about an individual support plan, is what it's taught. And some of that might actually mean that actually these youngsters need to be working in smaller groups. And so therefore, if you're requiring a smaller group, then there would be that requirement for additional resource to allow for those smaller groups. So I don't think it is as straightforward as we're going to be, having these youngsters in classrooms. It's about what's the need for, how do we meet the needs of that youngster, and how do we have the appropriate resource around it.
Yeah, it's going to be a balance, isn't it? Because obviously we have to provide for both mainstream and SEND. So there has to be, it needs to be like an equal playing field, if you like, for both. They both deserve an education, and they both deserve to have that time.
So this is about inclusive education, isn't it? And this is about saying, no. So it's not one or the other. This is about saying, look, so what are the needs of the youngster? And as a former classroom teacher, that no children are the same. And so therefore you've got to kind of amend and adapt your teaching style to the needs of the children. And so irrespective of the number of children you've got, that's what a teacher will be doing, and thinking about how do I adapt it so that it's appropriate for all of the youngsters. So it's not about one or the other. It's about, I've got a group of children, how am I supporting them and delivering what they need within the structure of the curriculum.
That's great. No, thank you. Have we got any more questions on this part of the agenda at all? No? Yeah, go ahead.
So what I'm asking is for the committee to consider, I recommend that the committee considers and challenges work undertaken to ensure we safeguard children, young people who are regularly absent or excluded from schools, and advise of any further information or action required with this report.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to note all the comments on what have been discussed today, and then anything that we have requested will be shared between the committee today.
And I'll follow up with the officers. Yeah.
And Helen will follow up with the officers as well, and anything else, and we will note this report as well. Thank you. So the next part of the agenda is school attainment. So if you would like to start with that, thank you.
Right, okay. The next report is on school attainment across Staffordshire. And again, when I talk about schools, it's our schools, the local authority schools and academies. It is important to recognise a change in the County Council's role when it comes to school improvement. As you'll see in the report, the majority of schools in Staffordshire are now academies, and the council no longer has the duty of funding to provide school improvement services. That responsibility sits now with the governors of the schools. Our job is to champion high standards and make sure we understand how schools are performing. The report sets out the risk analysis we carried out, which includes performance data, inspection outcomes, attendance and inclusion and exclusions. Obviously, we've talked about those in more detail. The report presents the performance outcomes at each stage of education, from our early years foundation stage and the good level of development through to GCSE outcomes. The report breaks this down by different groups of children and by district. It also shows performance trends over time. In some areas, Staffordshire continues to perform above national and regional averages, but there are groups of children whose outcomes remain weaker, and in some cases, performance still sits below the national and the comparative neighbours. So, any questions, really?
Okay, Councillor Wallens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you once again, Councillor Higgins, for your report. And what I find interesting is reflecting back from the education, the home educated parents we had early on today. I know some of them did struggle, and some of the home educated kids were struggling with GCSE, maths and English, and entry level. No, from my experience, but entry-level maths and English from when I did it at college was so much easier than doing it on a GCSE stage. So, if we're falling behind, with secondary performances in the lowest nationally quartile for 95 English and maths, for instance, would it be possible to roll out entry? I know this is more like a central government issue, really, but do you think rolling out entry-level maths and English to kids who are struggling in GCSE would be a better alternative?
So, I mean, in terms of those skills, there is a curriculum that takes place through across secondary school, and so even when you do those entry levels, those are we call them functional skills now, and level 2 is equivalent to a GCSE level. It's about the standard that's required rather than necessarily the entry level, and it's about outcomes, so that we want youngsters to be numerate and literate by the time they get to the end of kind of their statutory school age, which is equivalent to those GCSEs.
I was thinking, because I know, obviously, I left school 10 years ago now, which is ironic to say the least by saying that, but but you know, obviously I had to retake my maths and English at college, but I feel like, I wouldn't say to prevent like kids who haven't got their maths and English to go and retake it again. I thought offering it to entry-level maths and English at high school as an alternative to GCSEs will kind of solve that issue, I would imagine. Wouldn't you agree?
But it wouldn't be the equivalent. So what I'm saying is, so that you may have an entry level, but actually what we want is youngsters to kind of reach that standard. So an entry level isn't at the same standard.
But it is equivalent, isn't like level 2, it's been a long time since I've been in education, learning education at least. Isn't entry level 2 a C equivalent, to my knowledge, which is a pass?
So a functional skills level 2 is an equivalent to a GCSE, yeah, but not the entry level levels, which are pre kind of the level 2.
Cheers for that, thank you.
Thank you. So I have some questions sent to me by the Chair, Luca. So I'm just going to go through what I've got here that he would like me to ask, if that's okay. What other time period each school has sat in the... So this is item 6, page 20, section 10. But when I've gone on to page 20, it's not necessarily coming up.
So that's on the previous report.
There's only 10 pages on the previous report. Sorry, I'm looking at the top numbers, that's why.
Yeah, so
right.
we've sort of moved on from there.
So, page 21. So he's done the wrong item then?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. These are on the previous item, so am I okay to ask them now? Because he put agenda item 6 instead of agenda item 5. So the first one is on page 19. Summary item 1, section D/H. If we have a plan to implement and... would you like me to send these questions and then perhaps you can... Yeah, because I can't necessarily... I don't think these are...
I think, yeah, I would agree. If you send the questions, we'll provide the responses.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions on this agenda? Yes, Mr. Bell, thank you.
Thank you very much. Progress Attainment 8 performance and Progress 8 obviously is not where it needs to be. And similarly, the Staffordshire schools are performing well at expected standard at Key Stage 2, but not greater depth, and there could be some kind of correlation there. So what targeted interventions and what work's going on with schools to ensure that they are focusing on those key areas?
In terms of what work's going on, that's not a role for us. In terms of what targeted work is going on for the schools, that's an issue for themselves.
Clarify what the question is. So I understand that obviously it's down to the schools to ensure that they're carrying out the correct teaching and learning practices, but a bit like attendance, the role of the local authorities to ensure that standards are where they should be. So the question is about how do you raise the issue with schools and how do you share best practice? So again, you'll be getting some schools doing really well, other schools needing support, regardless of whether they're maintained or academy. So that's what I'm trying to tease out, really, of a recognition that the performance of our children is not where it needs to be compared to national, and how the local authorities are supporting schools in that role.
So I think the idea behind the annual categorisation is to actually to do that, to identify areas of high performance, areas of low performance, and to share that with all schools, to share that with CEOs as well, and to share that in forums like that. I think it's the expectation with the majority of schools, certainly as you were talking about secondary schools, is you would expect, I think, in that self-improving school system for academy trusts to be sharing that sort of good practice amongst their own schools. We don't do that, share that good practice. What we have started to do is we are looking at greater focus on disadvantaged, with the aim we are highlighting now, or looking to target those schools that are doing well, not just for all pupils, but doing well for disadvantaged pupils. And what we are hoping to do is probably more looking moving into the next academic year is to speak to those schools to see if they'll share the work that they are doing with disadvantaged pupils. In previous local authorities that I've worked in, where you have schools that are their disadvantaged pupils are doing well, they actually very often find it hard to articulate what they're doing differently to other schools, because it generally comes down to good leadership and quality first teaching. And then sometimes when you have schools that are not performing as well and you share that best practice, their often response is, we're doing that. And sometimes it's that difficult conversation, well, if it's having an impact here and it's not having an impact with you, you're probably not sort of, doing it exactly the same way. Sorry, Tim.
I think in terms of there's a broader piece of work that we're also doing, which is around, and it comes back to a point Councillor Higgins made before, around that broader support for children and young people. And so as part of the work around the Families First programme that's been delivered from the department, we're working and developing a support for schools as part of that process to think about, okay, so what is it then that the school needs? How do they work in partnership with our kind of early help colleagues, in terms of some of our social care colleagues, but also health partners as well, to think about, so what's the support that we need to provide for particular groups of children? And that's that particular group of youngsters, which is the more vulnerable groups, to support their improvement.
I think as well, I think in the past there hasn't been a great correlation between standards in some of our secondary schools and the Ofsted inspection grades. So we've had a number where they've been very low attainment, but they've still been judged to be good schools. So what we have found, although we've only had one secondary inspection so far, so it's more really from a primary perspective, is there seems to be a greater focus now on achievement. So we are hoping that even though it may be a more challenging 12 months, we would expect, because I think if you look in the report, there's a high number that we've categorised secondary schools as category 3. Can't remember off the top of 40%. So we would expect there to be more secondary schools this year identified as either needs attention or urgent improvement. And if that's not the case, it'd be worrying. But we're hoping with this new sort of Ofsted framework, there will be a better accountability. So maybe where there's good practice, that will be highlighted even stronger, and where there is poor practice, that may be highlighted as well. And I think with the added monitoring and intervention that will come through the government, through the RISE programme, I think that should benefit the system.
That's encouraging to hear, and I do agree with that. I think maybe when we're looking at attendance and the correlation as well of achievement, it's obviously very strong, and so there could be an opportunity to consider how the sharing of best practice can be developed at a local authority level as well, because I think that will boost attendance as well. The children have got to buy the ticket to come to school, haven't they? You know, and if it's not worth going to school, they won't go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? I did have one and then it went out of my head, so we'll move on. I'll email you. So thank you so much for coming today. I would like to note this report and the recommendations for it. If Councillor Higgins would like to add anything to that.
Follow the recommendations, yeah.
So we'll approve the recommendations and we will move on to the next agenda item. So if you'll just bear with me one moment. Thank you for coming and thank you for the report today. It's been very helpful. So now it is time for the exclusion of the public. The Chair will move, I will move, that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Schedule 12A as amended of the Local Government Act 1972 indicated below. And I'll just have one moment, please.